Welcome everybody to Cycle Jerks Podcast, episode 121. I'm
Oh
your
man,
host.
121. Woo!
Believe it. Yes, I'm your host, Mike Stewart, and I'm joined by the old and grumpy Dave Dalton. And and then also
It's
we're
so
pleased.
true.
It is. We are so pleased to have today Robb Dorr, who has ebikes.org, and he does a lot of product testing on this funny new thing called an e-bike. And so we're pleased to have you with us, Robb. Welcome to the
Oh,
podcast.
thanks for having me, guys. It's
Yeah.
a pleasure to be here. First
Hey,
podcast, so I'm
oh
excited.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
hey, okay, so no pressure. Then I gotta tell you, we've been on a bit of a roll, and I'm gonna just say I think we've had some A-list guests lately.
Yeah.
Um, but I've been anxiously awaiting this one. I am so pro e-bikes, and so I am thrilled to have you on. Just super stoked. So
Cool,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, well, I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to this. It's gonna be fun.
Dave's really pro e-bikes and doesn't own one, which is pretty funny. But anyway, Robb, let's
dude,
Yeah.
we own two.
okay, all
Okay.
right, all right, whatever. Okay, so Robb, let's find out, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Southern Maine, actually.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you probably don't get a lot of people from that area, but yeah, I grew up in Southern Maine until I went to college in Arizona. So, yeah.
Okay. Was there a cycling scene in Maine? Or when did
Um,
you find the bike?
um, I got probably my first geared bike when I was 8 was a Schwinn Caliente. So that
Oh,
was I have a picture of like an awesome buzz cut and like a 80s jacket sitting on top of this old steel Schwinn when I was 8. So a few years ago. And I would ride with my dad actually. He would take me out on what seemed like an endless ride, but looking back at it, it was probably 12, 15 miles. But at that age, 12 miles felt like forever. So he would ride quite a bit when I was younger. Yeah.
okay. So would you say your dad was a cyclist, or was it just something you guys did together?
He would go out on like group rides with friends. I wouldn't say he was a serious cyclist. Like he never watched the tour and wasn't really like into racing, just more casual riding with a group of buddies and stuff in that area. Maine's interesting that now there's a massive cycling community there, and they do like a big almost like RAGBRAI, but they do it for Maine. They have like a multiple day ride, goes through the whole state, different routes every year, that sort of thing. So there's a bigger community
What? Wait, whoa, whoa,
now.
whoa! Back up. What's the name of this thing?
Oh man, I'm gonna have to look it up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't off the top of my head, I don't know the name. I'm terrible with names. But it is an event. It's like in the summertime, and they do it all across the state of Maine. And every year, they change the route, kind of like RAGBRAI does. They go from north to south, different routes, different cities. Maine
Yeah.
has one just like that, and so you know, much larger cycling community now. There's really great trailways that they have in southern Maine, at least that I'm aware of. Old railway lines that they've converted into bike paths and go through the city and the countryside and stuff. So it's cool to see that. But growing up, it wasn't like that, and it was a lot of like shoulder riding and real close to cars. And I think that's where I learned to kind of ride with traffic and understand how to act like a car when you're in traffic and stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, the Rails to Trails is the name of that organization that turned a lot of those railroads into bike trails, and I know it's a lot more common back east than it is out here on the West Coast, but doing
yeah,
great work and opening up a lot of terrain for cyclists across the
yeah,
United States. So
Yeah,
kudos to
yeah,
them.
and that's awesome to hear about that. I mean, I'm geographically challenged, even though my family's from New England. So when you say Southern Maine, what cities are we talking about?
outside Portland. So I grew up in a small town called Gorham, and yeah, just like 15 minutes outside of Portland. Yep.
That's where
Yeah.
my aunt and uncle live there. So
Oh no
I know
way!
that
Right
I
on.
know that part
Small
of it.
world,
So,
man.
and
Yeah.
I don't mean to get onto a Maine geo, but I would be more interested in doing a Maine trip through Maine as opposed to RAGBRAI. As much as I heard great things about RAGBRAI,
Sure.
there's some sentimental value to Maine for me. So Cool.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'll
Okay.
send you the information there. I will find it. I just it's based on the name right now, so I'll definitely send it to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Ragbri. I mean, that's on my list. I'd like to go do Ragbri one time. Have you
It's a
done it,
lot of fun.
Rob?
I did it. Yeah, I did it 2019. I did it first time ever doing it, and absolutely loved it.
I hear
I think
it's amazing.
that was for me the first kind of a turning point in cycling for me, because it was always about. I lived in Southern California for about 12 years, and um, down in San Diego area, and there's a lot of really talented athletes down there that are riding, to race. They take it very seriously and very strict on their riding, and I kind of dabbled in that crowd a little bit, but I never felt like I truly belonged. I was never that good, never that fast, and the kind of the rigors of training and being that strict about being on a calorie count and getting the certain amount of watts, and everything that goes into kind of like race training never really sat well with me. I think just because I wasn't that passionate about doing it for myself, but there's a lot of people there regardless. So um but I'd always ridden very seriously with that group of people, but Ragbri really kind of turned it around for me, and I saw people on single speed bikes. I saw people on tandems. I saw people on beach cruisers. I saw people on all carbon, kitted out riding, and they're all just riding. And I think for me, that was a turning point. Because I'm like, this is just supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be this serious racing thing. If you don't want it to be, you can still get on a bike and just ride. And so that kind of changed my attitude about it. And so it was
Yeah.
such a great event
Cool.
for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah. No
So,
doubt.
but
I
Mike,
think. Oh, go ahead.
I don't think you're gonna like Ragbri. You don't drink, so I don't know
No, I don't
why you
drink.
would act.
No,
So I don't
I
know
would
why
just like
you'd
to go to
Rag.
the spectacle of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had
It,
this thing out here in Oakland. It's called Pedal Fest, and I mean, it's way smaller than Ragbri,
yeah.
but they have whiskey barrel racing where it's like this wooden circle that these guys get in and then rip around on,
Oh
and
my God.
it's kind of like a bicycle freak show. There's just like a
Sure.
lot of weird stuff going on, and it's all about bicycles. There's bicycle art, and yeah, it's super interesting and fun, even though you're
Yeah.
not
No,
banging out a bunch of watts.
yeah. Well,
Let's
I mean, that's good.
let's make a Ragbri. Let's make a Cycle Jerks Ragbri. Let's put it on the calendar, and we'll go. And Rob will come with us.
Please let me know when you're going to do it. I'll be there. It's so
All
much
right.
fun, guys. It's even if you don't drink, it's a blast. So
So, okay. So you went from Maine to Arizona for school.
yep.
So how did that, I mean, that's a huge, all the way across the country. How did that decision kind of play out for you?
He wanted warmth.
Yeah. You're going to get in
Yeah,
Arizona. That's for sure.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it I guess it played out well. I got a job right out of college and stayed in Arizona for another 7 years after I graduated, and then kind of migrated west to Southern California, like the LA area for a few years, and then San Diego for about 12 years. So
Okay. Were you in bikes right away, or did it, just
no,
start?
when I moved to Arizona, I kind of got into casual mountain bike riding. There's a couple like local trails in Tempe, like Papago Park and stuff. There's some small kind of trails you can dink around on, and I got into like I think that was my first front suspension mountain bike, so like a riding a hardtail through that stuff. Very novice, entry level type stuff. But kind of turned my eyes to more trail riding, that kind of thing. And then when I moved to Southern California, I was doing more running, like half marathons, 10Ks, things like that, endurance sports still. And then when I got down to San Diego, got back into mountain biking a little bit more seriously. It was lived near Mission Trails, which is a great system. It's like a 7 mile loop that you can just kind of putt around on all the time. And I would go probably a couple times a week. And there's a bunch of trails obviously in that area as well. But Mission Trails is kind of my home there. So did that for 5 or 6 years, and uh, notably we had one spring where we had a ton of rain, and it just brought out all the grass, all the bushes, and then with that comes the rodents, and then with those come the snakes. And so
Uh-huh.
we had so many rattlesnake instances. We were just running into them nonstop on the trails in that spring. And I remember one ride I was on. I was coming down a switchback, and this just brown rope went across the road right in front of me, and I just panicked and slammed both brakes on, head over, head over the handlebars, just dumped the bike, landed on a rock and busted up my knee. And I said, you know what? I don't know if I'm cut out for trail riding. I think just it caused something in me to shift a little bit, and then that kind of got me into road riding a little bit more. I said, well, let me get back into road riding. I did it as a kid, so maybe I'll like it again. And I started doing it more and found a really solid group of people that just got out and liked to ride. They're very good athletes. They were always placing in triathlons and road races, but they were fun to ride with because they were just like, yeah, just come as you are, ride whatever you want, and let's just have fun riding. And to me, again, that's kind of along with the RAGBRAI stuff, kind of like put me in a different direction of like a mental space. You guys had a guest on a couple episodes ago talking about like the mental aspect of athletes and what they do. They always focus on like one thing and they block out the rest of the noise. And to me, that kind of resonated. Someone said to me, get comfortable being uncomfortable and your perspective will change. Just know that you're going to be uncomfortable and focus on one aspect of what you're doing. And for me, that was kind of just breathing through the pain and just focus on having fun versus how many watts I was putting out or how fast I was going or how many miles I was doing. So I kind of found that mentality shift with those people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We really tapped into something with the book, Matt Fitzgerald's book, and it's got me on this bender, man. I'm listening to all these books on Audible while I'm riding now, and
Nice.
a lot of it's in that same thread though, about these mind games, and yeah, little tricks,
Yeah.
as you get older, your body's, sometimes I feel like I can gain an advantage with my mind, through some of the stuff that I've been learning lately. So it's kind of exciting in that regard, Yeah. So
I think you guys were, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I think you guys were kind of talking about that as well in a couple previous episodes about how mentally still there, still able to compete and get into that competitive space, but maybe days physically where you're like, man, my body just isn't putting out the output I expect it to. And I think that's where, if we want to tie things back to e-bikes, where e-bikes can be beneficial is that, you're still wanting to kind of keep up with that group ride. Maybe it's a no drop or, whatever it is, or you want to keep up with them and you're just physically not able to, but you're not looking to race or do anything like that. Like that's the perfect use case of an e-bike, is to, just give yourself a little bit of a break, I guess, as you're getting older or coming back from an injury.
Yeah, so that could be potentially a shitty segue, but let's do it. But how did you make that? And I don't want to imply that on an e-bike people don't suffer, right? I mean, they do, depending on the amount of assist they choose to use, because they can get a workout. But here you are riding with fairly competitive people at a fairly, at a good pace. Obviously, in order to do that, you need to be fit. When does this transition to e-bikes, or this love of e-bikes, when does that happen? When do you go from acoustic to e-bikes?
For me, relatively recently, actually kind of just stumbled into it, honestly, like a little bit later in the year last year. We started to kind of like learn a little bit more about it. And obviously I'm a little late to the game in that regard, but I've caught up quite a bit as I've been working in this space. And our website launched in April of this year, 2023. And so for me, it was a quick transition. It was easy to, I just love cycling in general. And it was my business partner kind of like talked to me about it. He said, hey, I think, we could really make a really, based on our background as web developers and running a content marketing software company for several years, we kind of understand how to get educational material out to the masses, and that's something that we're really good at. And he said, I think the e-bike space has a big need for consumer education, and that's kind of where we fit in with ebikes.org. So as we were doing a lot of researching, a lot of studying, I've been fortunate to be working with some people in the industry already. Alex Boyce is someone who we stumbled across, who's been doing, e-mountain bike reviews for the longest time. Tony Donaldson as well, out of Southern California. There, we've been working with them, and so it was a quick transition. But yeah, it was about a year ago, year and a half ago. Kind of got more serious into that space.
All right, this is confession time. Serious,
Sure.
serious question. Do you ride an e-bike? Or do you have an acoustic bike and an e-bike and they serve different purposes, or what? I say that because Mike says, Dave doesn't own one. Well, we own two. My wife has one for mountain biking and one for commuting. And
Sure.
I've seen how much it changed her life.
He
I've
says
seen the
we. He
stories.
says
So
we own two when it's both of them are Sue's. They're not
So
Dave's. They're Sue's
there's two in the
bikes.
garage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's two in the garage, and they have nothing to do with Dave. But he is
Sure.
enamored with the idea of the e-bike and just wants to. He's very excited about e-bikes. I am too, by the way. I'm an outside sales rep in the bike business, and if it's not for e-bikes, we would really be hurting because the e-bike has really saved the industry in a lot of regards, specifically with the independent bicycle retailer. High-end market and high-end mountain and road market. That's gotten kind of butchered quite a bit through the online sellers, and the audience for that product is a lot of times they've been doing it a long time. They're comfortable building it, or they have a buddy that can build it, and so they're fine just buying all their stuff online and having somebody do it and just cutting the bicycle retailer right out of the mix. The e-bike,
Sure.
there's a different level of complexity with the e-bike, and so consumers are less likely. There's still a small percentage that are willing to go online and do their thing, but the IBD can really help a consumer that's just getting into riding and wants to get an e-bike and get an education, and then also they're there for the service. So yeah, the e-bike's been instrumental, and I tease Dave, but I'm also a huge fan of e-bikes. I don't own one. I have in the past. It was actually mine. And it was a cargo e-bike. And
did you get rid of that? Did you get
I
rid of
did,
that?
yeah. Yeah, the bill comes due and then I just kind of flipped it, and I'm going to get another one. But the thing that I loved about it was my wife rides an e-bike, and she commutes to school, and we had this little date thing we would do on Sundays where we would get on the bikes. We would go to our favorite little restaurant for brunch and then go to the grocery store. And because my bike was a cargo bike, it had this big basket on the back, and we'd take these little Safeway reusable bags, and we'd go grocery shopping together and have like a nice little thing where made this mundane task kind of fun, you know. So yeah, no, I definitely, I'm a huge fan of the e-bike, and there have been events where I've actually been there, the only e-bike person representing e-bikes in a booth at an event where there's a lot of other stuff going on. And yeah, it's interesting the conversations that you end up having with people. It's definitely gotten a lot better these last couple years. Post-COVID, acceptance levels are way different, but pre-COVID, a lot of people would just I don't want to say confrontational, but there was definitely a confrontational element to a cyclist if you suggested that they get on an e-bike. So I think your timing's really good, is what I'm saying.
No, good. That's good to hear. Yeah,
in a roundabout way.
Yeah,
but we let you off the hook fast.
Yes.
You ride an e-bike.
I do have one, and I have an acoustic bike, if we can call it that, or conventional bike. I love conventional bikes. Honestly, that's my real passion. E-bikes are just an extra step, but yeah, I do have one, a personal one, not like one that I just keep around from reviewing and stuff. We do get those and ride those, as we see fit. But yeah, I do have my own personal one, similar to you, Mike. My wife and I have one. It's a 2-seater kind of cafe racer style e-bike, so it's not like a proper bike. It's you really kind of just sit back in a motorcycle position there, but it seats 2 people, and my wife and I take it downtown. So I live in Dallas, and our back door is pretty much the Katy Trail, which runs right through Dallas. And I think technically you're not supposed to have e-bikes on there, but I think if you're very polite and you kind of mind your P's and Q's and respectful of other pedestrians on the trail, you can get away with it. I'm probably legally not supposed to, but I think that's probably another topic we can discuss in detail. But yeah, we do ride downtown. We go to the Mavs game, we go to the Stars game. We'll go down to dinner, and again, like kind of a mundane task of just a date night can be that much better by riding together. And so she just sits on the back, kind of hangs out, and we put like a little speaker with music on and just, chill our way downtown. And so it's a lot of fun, very similar to you. We have a couple grocery stores nearby, and I have a cargo bike that I reviewed a couple months back that I keep in the stable that I take to the grocery store and use almost every day. So
Yeah, my friends were giving me a hard time because I was calling them our little Sunday adventure. And my
Mhm.
one of my buddies was like, "Oh yeah, that's a real adventure to the grocery store. How do you do it? Just give me crap." But because I mean, yeah, we go on some really fun adventures on our bikes. Not that that's not, it's just different. Whatever, just
Yeah,
We-
it's
good
totally
That's what we
different.
natured
used to.
living. Yeah,
When I had the shop, we had the e-bikes in there for demos, and that's what I used to call them. Sue and I would go and I called them Dave and Sue's Excellent E-Adventures, right? And we would just do rides, the American River Trail, across the Golden Gate Bridge, and it was fantastic. And it was just a great equalizer that we were both able to do, ride together at that, which we wouldn't be able to do if there wasn't an e-bike. So
all
Sure.
right, let's
Well, I think that's
I'm
let's
curious about the
let's
mechanics of the website and how do you get these products. So is it
okay.
do you reach out to companies, or is there someone, a shop that you're working with that's feeding you some stuff to test, or how does that come about?
Sure. Yeah. We initially got started by doing some research reviews and kind of proving some examples and sent those to different brands and said, hey, we did this review for your company, this particular model, or X, Y, and Z. And then there were a few brands that kind of, I guess you could call it taking a risk on us because you didn't know who we were, and totally understand that. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing. You gotta
Yeah,
have the reviews to prove to people you can do it, but you don't have the bike, so you kind of gotta get your way into that. But there were a couple brands that were willing to take a risk and send us some bikes, not knowing who we were. We turned around some amazing reviews for them, and since then we've gotten a ton of traction. Like I said, we launched in April, so we've only been up for 6 months or so, and we have brands now knocking on our door. We are not even doing outreach right now. They're coming to us, wanting us to do reviews for their bikes. So we do them at no charge because we feel like we need to maintain objectivity and an unbiased view on this. If we're being paid to do these things, then it's not. I think it's hard to justify objectivity, right? Say, oh,
yeah,
you guys are just shills for a certain brand or whatever, and that's not the case. We still get that from time to time. People are like, oh, this is obviously an ad, and while we do earn commission on sales with some of them, that's not the case for all of them. We're really focused on consumer education. So yeah, it's been a slow process of trying to prove ourselves to these brands and prove that we can bring the traffic in and stuff. And we're kind of already competing with a lot of other review sites in that space. So
and kudos for that. I mean, that may be a minor point, but it's not a minor point. It's a big deal. In the tech world, I spent a lot of years in marketing, and there was always these like awards for executives, to be there, or you wanted to send in your software, they're going to do a review. Most of the time, it was pay to play. Like if you had just sent in a bio for an executive to become a nominated for a channel chief or something like that, unless you were advertising with that magazine, you weren't in, right? And your
yeah.
software wasn't going to be in there unless it was accompanied by a year-long advertising plan, or you had some other buy-in. So
mhm.
kudos for staying neutral on that. I mean, it's huge, and that should
Yeah,
obviously raise the credibility of what you're doing.
Well,
I appreciate that.
yeah, one of the big challenges for the independent retailers is the marketing. And, if you like, I was at a dealer, I don't know, maybe a year ago, and the guy's all, have you ever just Googled best e-bike? So you Google best e-bike, and a bunch of these, it's all a bunch of marketing companies that are importing this stuff, this low level stuff from China. And that's what comes up. And it's positioned as a test. It'll say we shoot out the top 18 e-bikes in the industry. And then it's like all these brands I never even heard of.
Yeah.
And so the bike shops, it's like the bike shops want the true bicycle brands to combat that somehow. But it's a different model altogether. We spend our money on product development and uh, and delivering the best possible product to market that we can. These other companies buy a cheap product and they spend their money on marketing it, and the marketing's super effective. And they use a lot of different terms. Like I was at the same what prompted that conversation with the dealer was I was standing there and this customer came in and he said he needed 1,000-watt e-bike. And the guy's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. There's not really what are you talking about, battery or motor? And he's like, oh, well, we need 1,000 watts and it needs to be 270 volts. And it's like none of this stuff makes any sense in the quality bicycle world, right? But in the landscape of internet marketing, they're looking for these big numbers so they can drive some cheap product and then confuse the IBD because he didn't know how to answer it. And so, we developed a strategy on how to kind of deal with that customer. Mainly just get them on one of your bikes,
Sure.
Look, it looks like you've done a lot of research, but not everything on the internet is accurate. Here's, we have to stand behind this product and these are the brands that we sell. And here's what this is. And why don't you take this for a spin? So we kind of worked on a little routine on how to deal with it. But yeah, it's very challenging with the marketing of these e-bikes.
So,
sure.
Rob, I'm sorry to cut you, but this speaks, in my opinion, this speaks to the heart. I have a lot of questions here, and we've already gotten over one that I'm going to have to come back to, but it really speaks to the heart of why I wanted to do this episode. So obviously I have a bias in that I used to own a bike shop, and so I think of the top premium brands, right? Mm-hmm. But you sent me a list, and that had no less than 130 brands of e-bikes out there, right? 130, and I'm at least very closely tied to and I had I won't even drop an F-bomb. I had no freaking idea that there were 130 out there, right?
There's a ton.
And and bear with me, and again, tying back to why I want to do this, the last bike shop I worked in, we saw, it was during this pandemic, we saw all kinds of things come in that were quote unquote e-bikes. And it got to the point where there were certain ones where we wouldn't even change a flat because it meant we had to mess with the motor to get the rear tire off, or and we're like, no way. And so here's a guy that's just spent $500 on this e-bike and now he can't get a flat changed,
Sure.
So that's my point, right? 130. How does the consumer who wants an e-bike know that maybe the $200 one isn't really going to be the solution? And if you have reviews that say it is, then tell me I'm wrong. But that's why one of the reasons I wanted this thing, and I'll stop. But it is, I believe so much in the e-bike, but unless we get good e-bikes out there, it's going to be a disaster. So anyways, I think there's a question in there somewhere, but
no, I think I hear the question. Yeah, it's a good point. There are a ton of brands. That's just our research, that we did online. So there's 130 brands.
There's more.
There could be. There absolutely
I'm sure
could
there
be.
are.
Those are the ones that we found, and that's what's so hard, right? I think it all kind of comes down. I was thinking about this podcast for a long time and trying to think of talking points, and really everything kind of boils down to education, and that's really why we started this, right? Like, you wouldn't go buy a boat without doing some research and understanding the differences of what certain boats are. I think that, or any big purchase, you wouldn't really go into, I would assume I wouldn't personally go into without doing some research and really trying to figure out, like, what's the truth. And that's online research, that's going and talking to dealers, that's talking to several dealers. So if you're, looking for an e-bike, talking to not just one bike shop in the area, go to a second one that maybe sells different models, different brands, that kind of thing. But really it's education, and you have to educate yourself, because what you were talking about with people wanting a 1,000-watt e-bike. Okay, well, exactly, what does that mean? That person isn't really educated. They just heard something, and technically that falls outside of the classification of an e-bike, right? So everything is supported up to 750 watts maximum input to a motor. So anything beyond that is technically not an e-bike. And I think that's this kind of gray area that we're feeling here, where there is a segment of an e-bike audience that wants 1,000-watt,
Yeah.
dual battery, 100-mile range rocket. They want basically a motorcycle with an electric engine, which absolutely, that's great, but that's technically an electric vehicle.
Yeah.
They want to be able to go 40, 50 miles an hour on this thing. Well, that's not a bicycle, right? That's a EV, which again is a gray area, because e-bikes kind of cross that line into EVs as well, for commuters, people that want to get around in a vehicle alternative, right?
Yeah.
So it all comes back to education. And what I tell people that are looking for e-bikes is that your use case is yours, and it's not everybody else's. So if you're wanting something to get to the grocery store on, then that's what you're looking for. You're not going to buy, a $10,000 e-mountain bike for that.
Right.
That doesn't make sense, right? You're going to buy a cargo bike, maybe a long tail cargo bike that has extra room. Like, what's your use case? Those are, you can always kind of defend that thing, where it's like, if you're just looking for something to putt around the neighborhood and dink around, we did a review a couple weeks back that on a bike that had a range of 16 miles. And that's super small. That's not a big range, but it was kind of a moto style e-bike that was just meant for dicking around the neighborhood. It's not meant for going 60 miles on a group ride while you're wearing spandex and padded pants. Like, it's meant for wearing jeans and Converse and bopping around at the local bar or whatever you're doing. So use case is massive. So there could be bikes out there that fit that use for you. And then I always tell people to look for quality components. If they're name brand components, there's only a handful, I think, that really qualify as that, without listing them on here. But you educate yourself on what those are, because if that bike comes with those, then you can have your local mechanic service them, right? They're going to be familiar with these brands and say, okay, I can replace this derailleur. I can upgrade your drivetrain if you need to. Maybe you want to change out the cassette, get a better gear ratio. You can do that if you have these name brand components. If you have stuff that's not labeled, I mean, if you don't see the name on the derailleur or on the brakes, those are big indicators of, like, you probably shouldn't buy that, because it's probably proprietary, or it's a cheap knockoff of something, and it's not gonna last you. So, know your use case and look for brand name components. And then the third one I tell people is brakes. That's the biggest thing to look for. You're operating a vehicle that has a motor. You need to be able to stop, right? Brakes are important on bikes, period, but exponentially important when you have a motor kind of powering them. So those are the things, but it all kind of comes down to education. And anybody starting in the cycling industry is going to need to educate themselves, whether it's acoustic or electric. And there's a few more things, I guess, about electric bikes that you have to understand, like how the motor works and what the classes of e-bikes are.
So, to a couple of things, I would like to go through what the classes of it, maybe for the audience, if you could educate them. But you said this was designed for dicking around and going to the bar. Did you just endorse drinking and driving? I just want to.
Yeah, we're going to do some heavy edits on this, I think.
Yeah. They have those cup holders, Dave. You get the cup holder right on the handlebar, and then you just drop your beer right in there.
Yeah, always ride responsibly.
But I'm sorry, but I think the component thing extends beyond the derailleur and the brakes and whatnot, because the same thing with the motors and the batteries, right? If there's, again, the knockoff ones, if there's no way for a bike shop, for example, to update the firmware, right, or something like that, sure, something goes wrong, it's easy with some of the big manufacturers. Oh, okay, boom, we log in, we use an app, and everything's updated, right? So that's an issue as well, right?
For sure. And I think that's absolutely valid. And one thing I also tell people with, like, the direct to consumer purchasing of these bikes is, look at their customer service and how they treat you before a sale. Reach out to them, ask some questions. Ask them if they're UL certified for their batteries. That's a major thing. If their batteries need to be UL certified, if they're not, I would absolutely steer away from that stuff. And what that means is that they've gone through a rigorous testing and certification program through the UL company there. And so what that means is they're certified, and we're not going to run into a scenario like New York. I think everyone points to that New York battery fire story earlier this year as like a major issue to not own e-bikes or keep them in. Like, I think people have this preconceived notion that batteries are just going to explode out of nowhere, and that's not true, right? But if you do opt for these like no name brands and things that aren't safety certified, then you do run the risk of that, because it hasn't been checked by people. You don't know if it has, and that's really important. So I would say reach out to the bike companies themselves and ask all the questions you have. Ask them if they are UL certified. Ask them all the questions you have. What brand is their motor if it doesn't say it on the site? And if they don't answer you, don't get back to you, then I would steer away from that company completely, because all the experiences I've had with direct to consumer purchases, I've had really great customer service with. A couple of brands that we've worked with have had issues with the bikes where like the PCM wasn't working, which is like part of the motherboard there. It wasn't working, wasn't registering the odometer and speedometer. Reached out to them, and within like a day, they had a mobile repair company come out and replace it like free of charge. So I think that's, if you're not getting a response or you're not getting good customer service pre-sale, you're not going to get great customer service post-sale. So those are some things that can be red flags.
It's interesting with the fires, because you point to that one in New York, but man, out here in California, we see it all the time. And my buddy's a fireman, and he's just dealing with these e-bike fires all over the place. Yeah. And they've actually, like he was saying that now when you're building a new apartment building, you have to have a fire, they build a fire safe storage room. So they put for e-bike storage, because these buildings are catching on fire. And it's not something that anybody really even thinks about, right? When you're like, if you're just a layperson that's like, hey, I should get an e-bike, and you start looking online, that would never even occur to you that the battery's going to catch on fire. What? That's a crazy thing. But here we are with this, this stuff. And the company I represent, we have our batteries are $1,200, so it's like, because of the technology and the testing and the safety and all the things, that make it safe and reliable. And so when you see these bikes that are $600 or $1,000, it's like, man, I can't even get you a battery for that. So just knowing what I know, it's just like, man, how is it possible that this bike could even perform at any level? I know several of our IBDs have decided to not work on some of these bikes, because like I had a really he recently sold his store, but a really good dealer, that he decided that he's no longer going to work on these inexpensive e-bikes, because what would happen is he'd come in to get a tire changed, and he would change the tire, and then the customer would take the bike and then call him and say, hey, ever since you worked on it, my motor doesn't work now.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying before. Yeah.
And he'd be like, I didn't touch your motor. And they were like, well, it was fine when I brought it in. And so he's just like, after 3 times of this, it's like, this is a can of worms. This is like some kind of scam or something, and it puts him in a delicate spot where he's got a reputation to uphold. And then he goes down this rabbit hole trying to get these parts from questionable companies. And so it's a tricky thing to navigate. I mean, I think with regular bikes, there's not the spam that you have with e-bikes. Like if you just go on the internet, you're going to be spammed with like a bunch of just these crazy cheap e-bikes with all this weird information and these fake tests. But if you go to look for a regular bicycle, that doesn't exist. So I think the thing is, like, if you have this experience of shopping for a bicycle online, and then now it's time to get an e-bike, you go to the internet, and then and you get just a bunch of bad information.
Well,
Yeah.
and you know what, what you're doing, Rob, is so important because the stakes are so high, right? The stakes are so high for, well, number one, Mike, you guys talked about these fires, right?
Yeah.
But,
Yep.
and the breaks, but certainly for any rider. But what I'm seeing is that, you know, a lot of these parents are buying these for their kids,
Oh yeah.
right? They're buying these for their kids. And if they don't know that the brakes are no good, or the fact that this is not, it's an EV and not an e-bike, and they've got a kid out there, I see them going through my neighborhood at, you know, 30 miles an hour or something, and quite often not wearing a helmet. It's
Yeah.
scary. So I think on some level they've done a good thing, and they said, well, okay, now you get to ride to school on this and I don't have to drive you. So on some level they've done a good thing. But man, putting your kid on what'd you call it, a rocket, Rob,
Yeah.
it's just scary.
Well, I think that again, that kind of comes back to education. I'm not saying it's bad parenting, but would you ever just throw your kid in the car and be like, "Yeah, go ahead, go to school"? I think that, you know, we're currently in a space where I feel like e-bikes are becoming refined. We've kind of gotten out of that early experimentation phase. I think every new sport kind of goes through. If you look at like mountain bikes, right? It used to be just a couple of guys putting some beefy tires on their road bike and changing out the handlebars, like early experimenting with different frames. And now we're in advanced e-bike or advanced mountain bike phase now, where we're coming out with crazy technology. And you look at full suspension bikes, and you know, all that stuff. I think e-bikes are kind of going through that. Like, you know, maybe about 10 years ago, they were in the early stages of these massive batteries and these heavyweight bikes, and almost do-it-yourself style setups. And now we're getting into a refinement phase of things. But what we haven't reached is really that settling point of classification and regulation. You know, there's still such a big
Yeah.
gray area and all that stuff. And so there are companies out there pushing, I'll use air quotes, e-bikes, but they're really kind of EVs. So, you know, we go back to the classification of e-bikes, and an e-bike by definition is a bike that has pedals that are human operated, that trigger the motor to turn on, has a seat for the rider to sit on, which I know sounds stupid, but some, you know, that rules out scooters and things like that.
Yeah.
And then it also has an input, like I said, of under 750 watts to the motor, right? So those are the three things that qualify as an e-bike. And then what the classes are there's three different ones. There's the first one is the pedal assist only, and a top speed of 20 miles per hour. So there's no throttle, there's nothing like that. So the pedal assist will actually top out at 20 miles per hour. So it will not help you get any further past that. Now, if you grind on the cranks and you go as hard as you can, you get above that. It's human powered. It's not actually the motor assisting you. So that's class one. Class two is the throttle, in addition to the pedal assist, and the top speed of 20 miles per hour. So that means that if you're using the throttle, it will not allow you to go above 20 miles per hour. And then the last one, the third class is
Clarification: with that throttle, you don't have to pedal, right?
correct.
That's right.
But it has pedals, but you can get to it and then decide, nope, I'm just going to hit the throttle. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
That's a good clarification. And then the class three is pedal assist only, and a top speed of 28 miles per hour. So yeah, that's, you know, anything outside of those bounds is technically out of class. And I think that's where a lot of the legislation and regulation needs to kind of step in and start enforcing this stuff, because I think that there is a sector of people that do want something that goes faster and has has better performance. And totally, I think that, you know, there's a space for that. I just don't know if we can call them e-bikes. You know, I just think we have to make a line in the sand somewhere. And I think it really comes down to like legislation to say like, okay, these are the things that are e-bikes. Anything outside of this is an electric vehicle, whether it has pedals or whether it has foot pegs, whatever the case is, like it just falls out of that realm. And I think that's the only way you can really like help people understand what they're buying. Because if you bought something that goes 30 miles an hour and you gave it to your teenager, that's an electric vehicle that they don't have experience riding on the road yet. Maybe they do, but you know, I would bet they don't. So.
Yeah, we did a motorcycle.
Oh, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead. No,
we did a motorcycle show with my brand, you know, and we had an e-bike booth, and there were e-motorcycles there. And that's
Mhm.
like, that's like a whole new thing. But the motorcycle world is like gas and oil, guys. And so there's like this resistance to these motorcycles. And then, we were dealing with bicycles, so they had less resistance. It's not their passion. The people at the motorcycle show really into their motorcycles, but they get on our e-bike and they were like, oh man, this is super fun and blah, blah, blah. It seemed like they had less of a hang up about it than they did about the electric motorcycle. But
Mhm.
if you're going to sell somebody an electric motorcycle, that person needs to have a proper driver's license for that. What we're seeing now is we have these young kids that are getting these bikes. I just had this experience, I don't know, it's maybe a couple months ago, but my downtown in my hometown is it's a 2-lane road, very slow each direction. There's angle parking, right? So people go super slow down Main Street because it's dangerous. People are backing out of parking, and there's just not a lot of room. It's very tight. So I want to turn onto this street. I need to make a right turn, and I'm behind a car. So I look in my side view mirror and I see this person coming. I thought it was on an e-bike or a bicycle. And then it was quickly, I mean, they were just moving. And then as it gets closer, I see it's a kid, and he's on this thing that looks like a little mini bike, like a what I had back in the day, like this gas powered mini bike.
Mhm.
No helmet. He runs the red light. I was going to get over, but I'm a cyclist, so I don't know. I like to think that everybody does this, but I know otherwise because I ride my bike and I see what people do in their cars sometimes. But anyway, so I see this kid, so I didn't do anything. I just waited, but he blasts right through a red light. No helmet, and there was a car that he couldn't see because the car in front of me. There was a car coming this way, but he was going very slow because the traffic really balls up right here. So the car slams on his brakes, and the kid, kind of zigs through the intersection. And now, because I've gone over to the right, I can see the whole thing. The kid turns, flips the car off. When he
Yeah.
flips the car off, the bike veers, he hits the sidewalk. I mean, he's probably going 25, maybe 30, hits the sidewalk and rode out, though. He didn't crash. And I just
Yeah.
thought to
Now he's
myself, this has got to change. Something's got to give here. This is
that,
kind of crazy. You can't have this.
that
Yeah.
kid's not going to learn. Your kid's
Yeah.
not going to
So
learn, right?
Yeah.
I figured we'd talk about safety a little bit. So I did a
Yeah.
little research and found there was a study done in the National Library of Medicine, and they did a study from like 2011 to 2020, and they were looking at adolescents 2 to 18 riding e-bikes and what the rate of accidents were. And they said that males accounted for 82% of the e-bike injuries on the road, and of those, 43% of those were 10 to 13 years old. And I think that's,
Wow.
I can remember when I was that age riding my bike and I hated wearing a helmet. That
Yep.
was something that I was like, it's so dorky. It looks dumb.
Yep.
It just never looked cool. And that was, you just wanted to be cool at that age and kind of impress people. And then I remember a Thanksgiving, I was out riding after we ate, and I wrecked my bike in the middle of the street and don't remember any of it. I just remember waking up in my bed, and I guess what had happened was my neighbor was out for a walk after he ate, and he found me just laying in the road
Oh,
unconscious.
geez.
So yeah, and so that completely changed my perspective on wearing a helmet. And I think that again, it comes to education, that you can't. I don't know. It only takes one wreck to really change your perspective on this stuff, is my point. And you can hot dog it and you can do all this stuff, but it takes one time getting in an accident to change that around. And so I think it's on the parents a lot when they get these bikes for these kids to educate them and insist that they're wearing a helmet. My parents were, animate about me wearing a helmet. They're like, you're not leaving this road unless you're wearing a helmet. You know what I mean? And that's just,
Right.
I don't know how to enforce that stuff. There's no easy way to do it. There's always what I call the a-hole factor out there.
Yeah.
Even, you see that even in the acoustic cycling industry, that I've done enough group rides where you're riding as a group, and there's always that kind of one a-hole that like gets out of the bike lane when he doesn't need to, and he's annoying the
Right.
traffic next to you, and that causes tension, and the cars start honking and swerving into you, and you're just like, why are you creating this drama? You could just ride in the bike lane with us and things would
Yep.
be normal. Now there are times obviously you need to be in traffic, whatever, that's a different case, but there's always that a-hole factor. So even if we had 1,000 people that were operating, e-bikes safely, there's going to be at least one person or more that ruins it for everyone. They're on a mixed use pedestrian trail, and you could ride politely, use your bell, use your horn, and kind of say, hey, passing on your left. Or you could, run down the trail doing 20 miles an hour on your bike, zipping in and out of people, almost causing accidents, startling people. There's always that. So yeah, exactly. Just being that, but how do you control the e-hole factor? I don't know. I've yet to solve that riddle. So.
But it is. I do want to. I don't want to go down this rat hole, but I want to go back to this kid. $20 said if that kid had actually crashed and God forbid got hurt, somehow it would have been the bike manufacturer's fault. That's what my concern is, right? No,
you're probably right. You're probably right.
And I don't know the details, and I probably shouldn't go there. But there was that unfortunate incident with the rad bike, where they said that a quick release wasn't satisfactory for an e-bike and a disc brake, right? And some kid was killed, and the parents are suing for. I don't know. I shouldn't go there, but.
There's a lot of stuff. As someone who works in the bike industry, though, I always kind of go back. Of course, I go back to the independent bicycle retailer. I feel like that's a great place to get educated. And so if you're somebody looking for a bicycle, I feel like that's where you should start. Go talk to your local dealer. He can give you the rundown on the do's and don'ts, and then also talk to you about safety and how to properly use the bike and make sure that you leave there with like a game plan. But it's kind of like a desensitization. I'm not going to try to say that word, but you know
what you're trying to say.
Yeah. But like, the kid at some point they get their little Barbie electric scooter at Target or whatever, when they're 3 years old, and it barely moves with the little kid on it. And then and then that's their thing. They have that. And then they get a little older, and then they get a little one that goes a little faster, and then they get a little older. And then pretty soon you got this kid riding 30 miles an hour through traffic, flipping people off. It's like, it's sold as a toy almost, where it's not a toy really. It's definitely a piece of equipment that you need to be responsible on. But
and again, I think that's where like the classification and the legislation on these things kind of comes into play, and that's why it's important. We've talked to people for bikes a little bit about this. They're leading the charge in a lot of these things, and I think it's just that's the main thing. We have to find a way to classify these bikes and say that some of these are electric vehicles, and it's okay to say that, and there's a space for these electric vehicles. I'm not saying there's not. I just don't think we can call them bikes, because I don't think a bike should be going 30 miles an hour unless you know how to handle yourself going 30 miles an hour on two wheels.
I think that's a great distinction. I mean, I've been doing this. I had a bike shop for 6 years, and I worked in another one for 3. And I could explain it, but I was always looking for that distinction in EV versus e-bike. You just crystallized it for me, right? Yeah, right. It's legitimate. Go buy it, but don't call it a bike. And if you want a bike for your kid, don't buy an EV, right? And so I think that's a huge distinction. Great,
right. And we also need to enforce that, though, right? So that's the other part, is we need to, there's a lot of companies out there selling bikes that you can, jailbreak or alter with an app and say, okay, I want to, you can boost the top speed on them and things like that. And, I don't know where I kind of fall on that. I guess that's, they sell them as this. And if you want to modify them, that's, you're under your discretion. So there's gray area there as well. I think we're just, even though e-bikes have been around for a long time, we're still in a very new phase of that.
Yep. Yeah. And it is human nature, right? Uh-oh. I lost you guys. I wonder if it's me. Hello?
About that.
No, you're good. It's all good.
I don't even know what the heck. I'm on a hard wire. I'm not sure. I apologize. I just dropped out of there. Yeah, this is going to be a funky recording. I might have to edit. Dang
It
it.
just adds to the authenticity, Mike. That's what we're all about.
All right.
If
So
we had fancy editor's desk, we would look really polished, but that's just not our style.
yeah. Yeah.
So okay, so
Yeah, go
I don't know
ahead.
where we cut out. I don't know where we cut out and when the recording stopped, actually. But my question to Rob was, are we past that blowback phase where people are anti e-bike, and whether it be cheating or whether it be on the trail? And if I'm repeating, it's just I don't know where we stop. Like, where are we past that? Where, okay, yes, it's a mountain bike trail, so yes, we will allow an e-bike, and it's the Iron Horse Trail, or it's a walking trail that bikes are allowed on, but yes, we will allow e-bikes. And then that's more of a legislative thing, I think, but there's also that general public sense that, yeah, no, e-bikes are good, they serve a purpose, and it's not cheating. So what do you think, Rob?
Well, it's like I don't know if we're fully past the
Yeah.
kind of hating e-bike phase of life. I think that there's always going to be that group of people that feel a certain way about them because I do think, like, I can remember when I first saw an e-bike. I was riding up Mount Soledad in San Diego, which is about 2 miles of nonstop climbing, about 800 feet of elevation gain, and so you're just sitting in the saddle, just in the pain cave, and you're hating life for a couple stretches. And I remember one time this guy, with a newspaper tucked under his arm, was wearing flip flops on an e-bike and just rode past us like it was nothing. And so I just remember that immediate anger of like, screw you, dude. Like that, that's not
Yeah.
cool. But like, that's not cheating. Like, I was just going to go get his mail and have a coffee down at the local store. So I'm not racing. I'm not in an official event. So yeah, I don't think it's cheating. Now, if you are in a race event and someone's using an e-bike to gain an advantage, absolutely, that's cheating. Like, there's no question about that. So I think that if you're going to have e-bikes as a division of racing, fine, but you probably, again, have to have some regulations and in terms of what qualifies, and you have to have your bike inspected before. I would assume that's kind of how that stuff would work. So I think there's a space for that. And then as far as the acceptance of them, I think that we're working on it. I think you're starting to see, major brands out there coming up with e-bikes that, like, I guess the e-mountain bike sector is really the one where I've noticed it the most. So you have brands they're putting out really high quality machines that are intended to be ridden on trails without being all motor and no human. I think that's their goal, right? Is these torque censored mid drive engines that give you enough power to make it easier. I think there's one brand I'll mention is the SRAM Eagle powertrain just came out, which is
Yeah.
it's not just a motor, it's a full e-bike system, right?
Yep.
So it's designed to keep you at a certain cadence and auto shift for you. So you set your cadence to say 75, and as you slow down and your cadence slows down, it changes gears for you, so you keep at a 75 rep per minute cadence. And as you're going downhill, same thing, it auto shifts to be harder, so you keep that same cadence. And so that's amazing. If that's not acceptance, I don't know what is. And those are only on high end bikes, you know what I mean? Those are
Right.
on $10,000 mountain bikes. That's not something that's a commuter thing just yet, but give it 5-10 years, who knows, that may be kind of the new way of going about things. But you see some more entry level brands doing things like torque sensors, which is meant to just give you enough power to make it easier to pedal, and not so much like the cadence sensors, which just get triggered on as soon as you start pedaling. It gives you the full measure of that power at that pedal assist level, right? So a torque sensor gives you enough power to just sort of like make it easier to pedal. And I think you're seeing that a lot more. It's also extending the range of these bikes. So I do think there's acceptance in that way, where they're not trying to make this moped style machine. They're trying to make a bike that just makes it easier to pedal. So
Yeah, and I think in terms of acceptance, I mean, like, I ride at my local park here. It's rare I see people on acoustic bikes anymore. I mean, I see,
Mhm.
and it's the cool thing is it's like big groups where it's like men and women, sometimes different generations even, and they're all riding together. And whether the acoustic rider is accepting them or not doesn't really matter, because they're now the majority. The acoustic riders,
Mhm.
few and far between. The the and you see it also too with trail access, more and more. You're just seeing they're opening it up to e-bikes, But again, I think it does get that back to that legislation. It's all class 1 e-bike. Can't take a class 2 or a class 3 e-bike off-road. And, I think we'll see similar regulations as it comes to riding these things in traffic and some of these other EVs. Hopefully that'll get designated and sorted out pretty soon before too many more people die.
Yeah, no, for real. And I think even with trail riding of acoustic bikes, like there are those people that go out in wet conditions and gouge up the trail and rut it out. So the next people on there, when it dries out, have to deal with that. And so again, that's kind of the a-hole factor and it's an education thing. I think most people are understanding you're not supposed to do that, and that's kind of bad etiquette, bad juju, and you don't really do that if you respect the sport. But there are people out there that don't care, and that's kind of the a-hole factor. And I think that exists in any sport, right?
Yeah, the a-hole factor. Dave, that could be
it's a real thing.
That is the title of this podcast. Well, at least one of our sound bites anyways.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. Well, all right. So have you done any like real high level mountain bike testing, EMTB testing?
I have not yet personally. Like I said, I work with Alex Boyce, who handles a lot of those. He gets a lot of the high end e-mountain bikes sent to him personally. So I've been lucky to work with him on that. But as we're gaining some traction with these other brands, we're starting to get a little bit more attention. And I think I have the opportunity to do that pretty soon. Yeah.
Yeah. So how does the site generate revenue? So is it just ad dollars or?
Right now, if someone looks at a review on our site and goes to one of the brands and makes a purchase, we get a small cut of that sale. It doesn't cost the consumers anything, so it's just like an affiliate
marketing. It's just affiliate.
Okay. We're not paid by any brand to be sponsored or anything like that. It's no cost to the consumer. So we do these reviews free of charge. And then we put the videos up and the reviews up on our YouTube channel and on the website. And then if someone comes along, reads the review, goes to the website and makes a purchase, then we get a very small percentage of that. So, and that just keeps the lights on. Honestly, that's like, we're not making, I'm not retiring next year or anything from this. So it's a very small cut, and that's just honestly to help with operations and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's true with most people in the bike business. I always say it beats working, which is kind of, it's a joke, but because we work a lot, but it's something that we care about, and we're passionate about it. And, maybe we can make more money selling vacuum cleaners or something, but no, we're not going to do that. We'd rather do bikes. And, I think it's part of the deal.
Yeah. And this is a passion project for me, for sure. Like this is very much based out of passion and my love for cycling. And we're a very small company, and we've taken very little funding money to get up and going, because me and my business partner Jay want to own this and be our own bosses and not be swayed by investors to do certain things or whatever. We want to stay as true as we can to the industry and as objective as we can.
Yeah. So do you have a day job, so to speak, or is it you're all in on ebikes.org?
No, I'm all in on this right now. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. I took a big leap of faith.
Plan B.
Left my 9-to-5 last year. I had a good cushy software development job, and I left that to do this. So
okay. Yeah. Well, awesome. I love it. All the chips are in. That's how you succeed.
That's right.
Yeah.
All enough.
Good on you, man. Good on you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, listen, go ahead, Dave. You got something else?
So I think you're going to wrap, but I just want to, I don't want this to, get too mushy here, but I really do appreciate what you're doing, and please keep it up. I was just literally reading an article today where in Berlin and some other European cities, they're actually starting to roll back some of they had all budgeted money for these bike infrastructure projects, and they're starting to roll it back. And if we don't start making this kind of knowledge more accessible to people, preach the benefits of e-bikes, and then governments gets involved and build more infrastructure and stop making it easier for people to get in cars, we're never going to change this, right? we're never going to change that. The health benefits, the cars and the damage to no one ever lost weight from driving a car, right? And the impact on the environment, unless we keep those projects alive and keep the information coming about e-bikes and other bikes, I just don't think we're ever going to get there. And so I really appreciate, and that's why I was so excited about, one of the reasons I was so excited about having you on, Rob. I think you're doing a great service.
Yeah.
Of course, man. I was happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. And there's, to tie into that real quick, I know you're trying to wrap, but tying into that, there are a lot of things on the ballot in November this year that are going towards bike infrastructure, not just e-bikes, but bike infrastructure in many cities. Texas has a massive, like, $1 billion of funding that they're putting up for voting to improve biking infrastructure in the state. And there's a ton of states with these kind of projects on the ballot. So it's good to see that kind of traction. And then the government aspect of getting involved is they're trying to get the e-bike act passed, which would provide like up to 30% tax credit for the purchase of an e-bike, up to $1,500 in credit. Yeah, so it's good to see these things. It's incentive. That's just at the federal level. They're also doing, a lot of states and a lot of cities have their own e-bike incentive programs that they put together. So it's great to see kind of this adoption, but I think we're still at that point where we need to really define what these e-bikes are versus e-vehicles, and that's going to take a little time for us to get figured out. But
and
we'll get there.
Culturally too, to change, from mama hopping in the SUV to go get her Starbucks so she can drive to work, to instead going into the garage, grabbing an e-bike and riding to work. That's a huge cultural shift. And so it's a lot of layers to it, and how do we get there? But certainly the infrastructure's a really key part of it.
A major part of it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And rebates. We like rebates.
Those help. Yeah. Those are always good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, Rob, it's been a nice education for Dave and I, and hopefully our listeners. And we appreciate you. What are the best ways to follow along? Is it just ebikes.org? You guys on social media at all?
Ebikes.org. We don't have a massive social presence just yet. It's, again, a small team, so I can only do so much in a day. But yeah, just go to ebikes.org. We also have a YouTube channel up there. Just look for ebikes.org on YouTube. You'll find us. So those are the best ways to stay in touch with us. Absolutely.
Great.
Sweet.
All right, Dave, anything else?
That's it.
All right.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for having me.
We're going to wrap it up. Just some business on our end. If you like what we're doing, please leave us a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you'd like to send us an email with suggestions, you can reach us at cyclejerkspodcast2023@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the show, you go to cyclejerkspodcast.buzzsprout.com. Hit the subscribe button. We appreciate it. All right, that's going to do it.
That email address just rolls right off the tongue.
Man, yeah. I couldn't believe Cycle Jerks podcast was taken. It's like, what? How is it at Gmail? How was that taken? Somebody's
unbelievable.
Yeah, we got to it a little too late, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, maybe I could buy it. That's not going to happen. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much, Rob. Appreciate you joining us and taking the time. And be good, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Peace.